Almost 5 years ago, Sydney opened the first stage of its very ambitious new metro system, with a line connecting Tallawong in the city's northwest to Chatswood in the north. And while this new line might have faced some issues during its construction, like some pretty big budget blowouts, it has proved to be quite successful, with ridership performing above expectations. And now the second phase, Sydney Metro City and South West, is set to open in just a few months. It involves the extension of the line built in Phase 1 from Chatswood to the Sydney city centre, and then eventually onto the existing tracks through to Bankstown. I've already done a video on the first two stages of Sydney Metro, which I'd encourage you to check out if you haven't already, but in this one I want to talk about what's next for this very ambitious set of projects. Because Sydney's not stopping there, there are already two other new metro lines under construction. One which is going to run from the upcoming Western Sydney Airport to the existing train station at St Mary's, and a second that's going to be the focus of this video, which is going to run from Sydney's main central business district, or CBD, to its fast-growing second CBD in Parramatta. This line is currently called Sydney Metro West and started construction in 2020, with an expected opening date of 2032. It has multiple reasons for being built, including expanding rail access to new areas, enabling new transport interchanges, and creating opportunities for new urban redevelopments. But perhaps the main reason is to ease the pressure off the main Western Railway line, the busiest set of tracks in the city. The main Western Railway mostly consists of 6 tracks that carry the T1, T2 and T9 suburban rail lines, as well as various intercity and regional rail services, and the occasional freight train on top of that. So it is under a lot of pressure. The busiest section of it is the bit running between Parramatta and the Sydney CBD. So the new Metro West line will run sort of parallel to this, giving commuters between these points an alternative route that will hopefully relieve some of the pressure on the main Western Railway. Speaking of the route, Metro West will be about 24 kilometres long, starting from a new station at Hunter Street in the Sydney CBD, which will also offer potential interchanges with the Sydney Light Rail and the existing stations at Wynyard and Martin Place. Well, kinda, I'll get back to that later. But after Hunter Street, the line will go under Darling Harbour for a new station at Piermont, another significant business precinct, and where there will also be a potential interchange with the L1 light rail line. From here, the line will head under the harbour again to a new station currently called the Bays in Rozelle. At the moment, this area is a fairly desolate and underused shipping port, but with the new station it could see some substantial rejuvenation. Then the line heads beneath Iron Cove for the next station at 5 Dock. The distance between 5 Dock and the Bays is pretty big, and I do wonder if there shouldn't be a station in between, in Lilyfield for example. It could even connect up with the L1 for an interchange, although an interchange with that line is already possible in Piermont. That said, putting these additional stations aside, the line then heads to Burwood North for a new station that is situated honestly pretty close to the existing Burwood station. I do have to think that this particular station could have been situated a little bit further away from the existing one, as the current location is just about a 12-minute walk away from it. Personally, I think putting the new station somewhere like in Concord could have given it a better catchment and served more new areas. But after Burwood North, the line continues up to North Strathfield, an existing train station where it will provide an interchange with the T9 Northern Line. Then onto Olympic Park, a major events precinct which has also seen quite a bit of residential development in recent years, although not always good development, where there will be an interchange with the current T7 Olympic Park shuttle service. Now, from here, the original plans had the line running about 6.5 kilometres to Parramatta without any additional stops. And a bit like the gap between 5 Dock and the Bays, I think this could have been a bit of a missed opportunity. But the new state government has announced plans to build an additional stop in the suburb of Rose Hill, replacing the existing racecourse and opening up the area for new residential development. Premier Chris Minns even suggested that 25,000 new homes could be built in the precinct. This does, however, still leave a pretty big gap between Rose Hill and Olympic Park. I can't help but wonder if it might be a good idea to put a new station somewhere like Silverwater as well. It's about halfway between them, and while it's mostly just an industrial wasteland at the moment, much like Rose Hill, it could be a great site for new residential development, which, given the city's extreme housing shortage, is pretty needed. But after Rose Hill, the line makes its way to Parramatta, where it won't actually interchange with the busy Parramatta station. Which may sound like an odd decision, and it kind of is, but it should have an interchange with the upcoming Parramatta light rail line, and the existing Parramatta station can get really busy at times, so keeping this new station separate will help avoid adding to that. That said, if it's not going to interchange with the existing station, perhaps it could have been built a bit further north, so that it still serves the Parramatta CBD but could also provide better connectivity to North Parramatta, which currently doesn't have a major rail station. But while the line doesn't connect with Parramatta station, it does connect up with the next station down the line at Westmead, which is an important healthcare and employment precinct. At Westmead, passengers will be able to change for the existing T1 Western and T5 Cumberland lines, as well as another interchange with the upcoming Parramatta light rail. While this is a pretty solid interchange, it's not quite as good as an interchange at Parramatta Station could be. The Blue Mountains line and T2 Inner West line both stop at Parramatta, but don't stop at Westmead, so the interchange opportunities will be fewer for passengers wanting to travel on those lines. Stops for both lines could theoretically be added at Westmead, but there hasn't been any talk on that just yet. That said, Westmead does bring us to the end of the current plans for Metro West, which leads me to the question, will this line be a game changer for Sydney? Well, looking back at the map, it will definitely be giving a bunch of new areas access to high quality rail service where they've previously just relied on buses, especially areas like Rose Hill, Five Dock and the Bays. But then, a lot of the other new stations are either directly connected or at least pretty close to existing ones. For the ones that are directly connected, these will help provide a major boost to Sydney's transit connectivity by adding new interchange options to the city's public transport network. Somebody travelling down the T9 Northern Line, for example, will now get a new way to get to Pyrmont without having to go all the way to Central. Improving the interchange options on a city's public transport network is key to improving its usage, especially when it improves the options for trips that don't involve just travelling from the suburbs to the city centre. With that said, some of the interchange options aren't quite as solid. I've already mentioned the lack of a connection at Parramatta Station, but there's also the placement of the Hunter Street station in the Sydney CBD. It sits kind of in between the existing Martin Place and Wynyard stations and will apparently have foot tunnels connecting it with them. However, this means interchanges with those stations will require a bit of walking and won't be overly convenient, especially not compared with the cross-platform interchanges found at other places on the network. And many travellers are going to be needing to use these interchanges. The Sydney CBD isn't small, it can easily take 40 minutes to walk from Circular Quay to Central. So if their final destinations aren't close to the Hunter Street station, and especially if they're somewhere like the North Sydney CBD, they're going to have to change trains. It might have been better if this new CBD station was better integrated with one of the existing stations, or if the new line had more than one stop in the Sydney CBD, although CBD stations tend to be very expensive to build. Another, less costly option could have been, and bear with me here because it might be a bit controversial, connecting the line up with the City and South West Metro at either Barangaroo or Martin Place, and having it share those tracks and stations through the CBD. Of course, capacity could be a concern, but both lines are a long way away from that being an issue, and they are future-proofed in other ways, like the ability to extend the current 6-car trains to 8-car ones. The Elizabeth line in London is a recently opened and quite busy line that was built to have its inner city section shared by multiple branches on its outer sections, so I do think Sydney could get away with doing the same. And speaking of outer sections, I'd like to hear more from the government about where they want the line to go after the initial section has been built. Sydney's Mayor Clover Moore has called for the line to be extended eastwards towards Zetland, but there's been no confirmation on that. And a map released by the state government hints at a possible extension to the upcoming Western Sydney Airport, but this map is very vague and there haven't been any concrete plans released for this. Personally, I think a potential western extension could be built along the existing T-Way bus route that runs between Parramatta and Liverpool. This route has its own right-of-way that could be taken over for an elevated metro line, which would be cheaper to build than a tunnelled line, and could provide a much-needed transit boost to Sydney southwest. It could even extend as far as suburbs like Camden that sorely need better transit connectivity. But I would like to know your guys' thoughts on what possible extensions could be built, so drop a comment if you have any ideas. I think having these potential extensions planned out can be quite important, and ideally the government should have plans for future stages for this new line. That way, these stages can be integrated into the project plan, and that means that future governments will be forced to cancel them rather than simply not start them, like if they'd just been vague future ideas. And governments would be a little more hesitant to cancel them due to the potential political blowback. But at least for the time being, Sydney Metro West seems to be progressing pretty well, and I don't doubt that it will eventually become a very important part of Sydney's public transport network. And at least there is still a bit of time before these plans for future extensions need to be made concrete. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. I also want to give a shout out to the channel Sydney Trains Vlogs, where I got a fair bit of the background footage for this video. And of course, I'm City Moose, thanks for watching.